Hello. Okay, Mean Girls, a musical teen comedy based on the Broadway musical of the same name, and in turn also based on the 2004 comedy movie of the same name. And so the film follows a Cady Heron, a new student who gets caught in the crosshairs of an elite group of popular girls called the Plastics. And Plastic really sort of sums up my overall experience with this movie and how they sort of told the story and handled their characters along with the writing. Everything felt very unnatural and fake, which is quite funny considering the subject matter that they're exploring with this movie. But at the same time, it somewhat sort of suits the style in the way in which they're telling the story, which is this very kind of fantastical like musical. So it does kind of suit what it is they're doing with this sort of version of the story and the way they're telling it. And I do feel like the film is at its strongest in these moments when it comes to the musical numbers. And what I mean by musical numbers and the film being, you know, the strongest during these moments, it's not the actual songs themselves, but it's how these moments, how these scenes when they burst out into dance and song, it's how they are played out and sort of how they are choreographed. And just, yeah, I just liked how they were brought to life. When it comes to the actual musical numbers themselves, I found them to be very much the same kind of one note. Like, not one musical number really stood out. And they all sort of blurred into one. They all kind of sounded the same. And so every song just really lacked its own distinct identity. And they all just seemed to blur into one and all just sounded the same. Even though the musical numbers didn't really hit a chord with me, I really did appreciate them from the way in which they were brought to life, from the choreography and sort of from just a technical perspective. I didn't really mind them, but for me the movie truly falters during the moments in between the musical numbers. It's the moments with our characters and when the film is not actually trying to be different. And this might just be down to personal preference, but I just didn't like the lack of groundedness to these moments with the characters. Everything somewhat retained this very fake and natural feeling when I just felt like when it came to these moments with character, it needed to be a little bit more real and grounded, and it just sort of retained that kind of very fake, fantastical feeling that the movie was creating through the musical numbers. And yeah, I know that this movie is aimed towards a certain demographic, and I think this movie will work for a lot of people that it is aimed towards. But for me personally, and maybe this is my age really starting to show you, but everything felt too forced in how they brought this world to life. This is what I mean about it all feeling very fake. It portrays an environment that feels too ideal for it to feel like something that actually exists in reality, and it just tries very hard at enforcing this kind of environment that they sort of bring into life within the story, and it just doesn't quite sort of align with what they are exploring with the story for me. But again, this could just be personal preference. You know, it's really just sort of really trying to reflect a more ideal world that I feel does not fit into the one that actually exists. And I feel for a story like this to really work, it needs to. But like I said, this could very well just be personal preference, and it's engineered in such a way due to it being a musical. So, you know, the way in which they tell the story, that's how it's engineered to be. But also the humour, you know, they really try for this film to be sort of edgy when it comes to the humour, but they fail massively at it. Like, I've never seen the original movie, the 2004 comedy. I've just never seen it, so I can't really compare this version to that version, or even the Broadway musical. I've never watched it, so I can't compare it. But for me, just the actual story and what the story is about, it doesn't feel like they do anything majorly new. Everything just felt kind of dull. The musical numbers didn't really stand out. Everything's just sort of one note. It just felt very kind of paint by the numbers, and there was just nothing really special about it. And yes, I will admit, I am definitely not the target audience for this film, but it still could have worked from a storytelling perspective, irrelevant if I'm the target audience or not, and it just doesn't achieve that for me. It just felt very disconnected to what reality actually is. That's how it felt to me, and this is what I mean by the film, you know, by me sort of showing my age here. But like growing up in that environment, irrelevant if you're a male or you're a female, just the way in which this environment that these characters are based in or within, it felt like, yeah, it just doesn't really kind of align with what it actually is or what it feels to be that age within sort of that environment. I just feel like the film kind of really struggles to sort of balance sort of what it is they're exploring with the story with sort of the musical, fantastical element of the film, if that makes any sense. And with all that being said, I don't think this is a terrible movie, and I don't think it's a great movie. Like I said, I'm not really this movie's target audience, but it could have been something for me if they'd managed to tell the story in a way in which I could somewhat connect to it on some level, maybe. But like I said, it just didn't quite come together for me. It just didn't quite work, and I just found the experience to be quite a drag, to be honest with you. It was very dull, and even when the musical numbers would start, they would start in a way that would sort of go, oh, you know, it kind of catch your interest, and a lot of that was just down to the way in which these scenes would play out. But then as the musical numbers would get going, it was like, oh, like this really lacks punch. And so the person that I watched this film with is a massive fan of that original movie, which is also based on a book, by the way, which I didn't know until I was doing my notes for this review. But that particular person, who's a big fan of the 2004 movie, hated this film. I didn't hate it, but I can't say I really liked it either, to be honest. It was just very kind of okay. It was done well. Like, the movie was well made. It wasn't a terribly made movie. It was just it was a very kind of just dull, one-note experience. But that doesn't mean there are going to be, you know, that doesn't mean that the audience that this film is targeted towards, that there's not going to be people who will fall in love with this film. I really think there are people out there who will fall in love with this movie. Obviously, especially those that this film is targeted towards with sort of the age and all of that. I think there are people who are going to connect with this film and it's going to resonate. But like for myself, for example, there was just really nothing in it for me to sort of, yeah, get excited about. In a way, the overall experience, like, it felt very fake, it felt very unnatural, but it also lacked charm, and it just lacked character, and it lacked punch. It lacked a groundedness that I felt like the story needed. And so as a result, I just, again, like I said, no matter what age you are, I mean, the way, if they could have told this story slightly different, it doesn't matter what age you are, I could have maybe have connected to it on some level, even if it may have just been nostalgia, but it doesn't manage that. So yeah, enough rambling on from me. That's how I felt about Mean Girls, and I will be giving Mean Girls, the musical, a 4 out of 10. So yeah, they are my thoughts on the Mean Girls, the musical, but what did you guys think? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Do you prefer the Broadway version, or do you prefer the 2004 movie? Let me know in the comments below, and let's get a discussion going. And if you've made it this far into the video, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And if you want to watch future reviews from just some random Welsh geek rambling on, then please hit that subscribe button. It will mean an awful lot. I'm going to catch The Holdovers over the weekend. We're only now getting that here in the UK tomorrow. It's been out in the States, I believe it was late last year. So yeah, that sucks. But yeah, I am really looking forward to catching The Holdovers. I've heard a lot of positive buzz around this movie. And yeah, again, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And I'll be catching you guys soon.